Good evening. My name is Brooke Valenzuela, and tonight I'm going to be diving into our readings from this week and talking about a Reconstructivist perspective of African education. To get started, one of the things that I found very interesting was the fact that many of the countries in Africa, the four in particular that we were studying, are fairly new to their independence from colonialism. We're talking like the last 50 to 75 years. And so, in that newfound independence, they are focusing on trying to Africanize their country. And for each country, that looks a little bit different, right? They have their own religious beliefs, their own language preferences, and of course, this idea of having some national unity. And I know this might be kind of like a weird connection, but as I was reading about this, I couldn't help but think about the United States, where I feel like we kind of have our national values and ideals when it comes to education, but really each state has its own culture. And it may not be religion per se or even language, but just things that we cover in our curriculum in California, for example, might be very different than, let's say, Ohio. And that's politically driven and also resource driven. But I just thought it was very interesting that even in our country, our states have different cultures similar to that of Africa, and that the countries within Africa have their own cultures as well. In addition to Africanizing education, they are looking to modernize it as well. And so this is just kind of like the I overarching idea, excuse me, of globalization, where they're looking to push vocational skills to help with high unemployment rates after students finish school. They're also looking to bring educational resources to rural areas that were often forgotten, and of course bring some gender equity and desegregating what's covered in the curriculum and making it accessible to all. And in modernizing, what a lot of these countries in Africa are trying to do is to maintain their liberation from colonialism, but also gain economic independence and power um, when it comes to globalization and making a better life for themselves. So that's just kind of part of, you could sense that there's this battle between hanging on to their traditions and their culture, but also modernizing themselves to make them competitive. One of the quotes that really stood out to me in the Woman article was talking about the numerous problems that are being seen throughout the various countries in Africa. And those problems include irrelevant curriculum, antiquated methods, high dropout and repetition rates, and overcrowding. And, the fact that many graduates are docile and dependent, low on initiative, and immoral. And again, a weird connection. It just kind of made me think about our own students here in the United States, where, a lot of our students are really apathetic and don't really know how to do anything on their own. And so I just thought, wow, this is so interesting that, we are in a very wealthy nation compared to some of these countries in Africa, and yet we have the same problems. It looks different and it's caused by different things, but honestly, we have this in common, I would imagine, across the globe. In that Woman article, they discuss potential um, ways to gain educational reconstruction. So they talk a lot about policy reform and making education mandatory for all and also accessible for all. They talk about instructional methods and teaching requirements. They also talk about relevance and making sure that there's consistency in their philosophies, but also making it relevant for the students to care enough to attend school. And of course, updating their materials and facilities so that students are safe and feel welcomed. This actually connects to a unit I'm doing right now with my juniors. We're reading The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And there's a part in the book where William Kamkwamba, the author, is talking about his primary school versus his secondary school. And his secondary school he had to pay for versus the primary school. And the secondary school is actually in worse conditions than the primary school. There was a large hole in the middle of their classroom. They didn't have desks, so they'd sit on the floor. And so the textbooks they had to pay for, the textbooks were extremely outdated. So it actually really hit home for me as a teacher that we're still reading about this, even though in this particular case, it's Malawi, they've been independent from colonialism for quite some time. Uh, they are still struggling to um, modernize, right? And to meet the needs of the students in all of these ways. Additionally, the UNICEF piece had made an additional recommendation of starting learning early on, like foundational learning. And to me, that tied in with the Tobin and Karasawa article, where they were mentioning the integration of preschool in the United States and some Asian countries as well. And so I think globally, we're seeing this importance being put on early education, setting the foundation for students to be successful not only in school, but also in life. To end, here are a couple of quotes that just really stood out to me. One is from the Woman article. It states education should function as an agency of cultural transmission as well as change. It should also reflect the dynamic process of nation building that is continually being modified by new conditions. And then in the article by Hua, it states, in studying foreign systems of education, we should not forget that the things outside the schools matter even more than the things inside the schools and govern and interpret the things inside. And I just think it really brings home the point that education really is a means of converging culture, um, as well as economic demands, right? And fostering students that are dependent and intelligent and critical thinkers, but that can also be contributors to society as a whole. And I just think it's really important for us to understand that education goes beyond curriculum and instruction, but is also a way to really embrace culture and really embrace what is important and what matters to the demographic of the students that they are reaching out to. That is all. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great night.